The Best Way to Explain It, Episode 12. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Best Way to Explain It, the podcast where we shun those who pronounce crayon incorrectly. That is the most annoying thing I think I have ever heard.
Wait, you mean crowns?
Oh my, no. Nope.
No, I'm the same exact way, dude. I hate when people pronounce words that are hard to pronounce incorrectly.
Yeah.
To call out my boy Ransom. He everyone stumbles on some of those words in the Bible, especially Old Testament words.
Right.
And I would fly through them, and then he would stumble on them, and I'd just be sitting there getting slightly anxious because I'm a terrible person.
Yeah. Well, it's like that. It's like when the teacher would call on that person that just could not read, to read 3 pages out of the textbook, and everyone just wants to die.
I got yelled at one time by a teacher, and now I understand it. But back then, I was like, we just want to get through this reading passage, right? So I got yelled at because someone couldn't pronounce, I forget the word that they couldn't pronounce, but it was a fairly simple word, and so I just blurted out without even thinking, and the teacher's like, you've got to let him figure it out.
Oh, man.
And I was
I don't.
Yeah, and I was the good kid in elementary school, so I was like, well, my day's ruined.
Oh, man. Yeah. No, but I was talking to somebody the other day, and she kept saying it cran.
Ooh.
Just cran.
Interesting.
I'm like, what is a cran?
Are you eating cranberries and just felt like shortening it?
No, I was like, it's not at all cran. Look at how it's spelled. Crayon. Oh man. That's so it's the little things that bug you.
Yeah. Yeah, we probably lost a few people on that,
We don't actually shun you. Just don't talk.
Just don't talk about crayons. It's pretty easy.
Basically. Yeah.
Oh man.
So yeah, welcome back everybody. We're we're actually recording these on back-to-back nights, so that's a first here.
It's the weekly grind, man.
Yep, that's what we do. But just want to remind you guys that this will be coming out on the 20th, that the giveaway that we're having for the Amazon Echo is still going on. Remember, you just have to leave a rating and review on iTunes, take a screenshot of that, and then send it to my email at scott@thebestwaytoexplainit.com, and also add your name, so that way when we announce the winner on the show, we don't just say this email or this iTunes username won, but we can actually say you by name, and then we'll get in contact with you via the email that you used to send us the screenshot.
So yeah. No fake emails, Sean.
Yeah, Sean. Well, I mean, you can, but you're just
you're
not going to be getting the Echo.
Losing out on a Amazon Echo.
Yeah, so yeah, appreciate it if you guys would go ahead and do that, and that would be good, not only for us but also for you.
Yeah, it's a win-win situation.
It really is. It really is. All right. So, Breckan, what are we talking about today?
Dude, we are talking about a really interesting subject today. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay.
It's another suggestion. I'm unoriginal, so I just go to the suggestions. You guys can hit us up at thebestwaytoexplainit.com/suggestions. Wow, that's a lot of S's. And
speaking of people who can't pronounce words.
And our friend Luke sent a suggestion that caught my eye, and it went a little something like this. It starts out, how are babies made? JK. How do facial expressions work? Why does the human race have generally the same facial expressions to similar stimuli? Are these reactions learned? People have different sensitivities to events in their lives, but yet will default to an almost predictable facial expression, excluding clinically insane. Here's where babies come in. Survey a panel of babies with the stimulus of taking away their candy or toy or whatever, and you will get the same response. And why do certain emotions give way to specific stimuli? Of all the things that are subjective in our world, how are emotions/facial expressions not subjective based on anatomy and environment? Ramble, sorry if this does not make sense. Well, Luke, it made perfect sense. And it's something that I've read about in a book called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. And it's also something that's just really interesting to me, because when you see someone and you can't speak the same language, I tend to smile just to show them, like, hey, I'm friendly. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in pain, like, pain is the universal language. If you're in pain, you're like crying or you're frowning. So
we
why
all react the same?
Yeah, why do we all react the same, even though our cultures are vastly different? You know, we have different.
That is a good question.
Yeah. So getting really deep into it. That's
because when I saw
question.
it, sorry, I was just gonna butt it, and then I'll
No,
let
you're
you
fine, man.
be all sciencey about
You're
it.
fine.
No, but when I saw it, I was thinking to myself, I was like, how. Like, I got what he was trying to say, but I was like, this is gonna be a really difficult episode to do. So I'm glad you picked it up, because I'm really intrigued now.
Yeah, man.
But yeah.
Yeah. So
floor is yours.
So I'm not huge on like behavioral psychology and stuff. Like, I think some of it is just kind of like you make up a theory and then your theory gets disproven about 10 years later. But this stuff has been consistent for about 100 years now. It was first theorized by Darwin and then moved through the ages and really picked up in the 60s with a man that we will meet later named Paul Ekman. So, moving into my actual explanation and not my summary of everything I'm going to teach you. When someone frowns or smiles, you can typically tell that they are sad or happy, respectively. And given the context, we develop this reaction as a baby. Wow, I was very tired when I wrote that. Given the context, we can tell if someone's happy or sad, or if they're kind of like faking it, you know? And you develop that reaction as a baby, or possibly before through evolution, either micro or macro, however you want to take it.
We make no claim.
Yeah. When a baby is sad, its forehead moves up, and you can definitely tell when that baby is not going to have a magical day. Because it starts crying, and it annoys you, and you decide whether or not you want to have children based on that fact.
Yep. It starts pooping.
Yep. Yeah. Starts getting smelly. Or you can see something beautiful like a baby laughing. I remember one time one of our family friends had us over. She was watching us, and she had just had a newborn that was in their little bouncy play thing. And my brother would go out and hula hoop, and the baby was just laughing hysterically. It was the cutest thing ever. So you develop these reactions as a baby. So there's no real cultural effects. There's nothing like you're either happy or sad as a baby, or you're pooping. So the universal recognition and conveyance of emotion through facial expressions has been studied for a long time. As I said, going back to Darwin. And then the earliest studies that really proved something were conducted by Paul Ekman and Carol Izard. Although they kind of turned up inconclusive, they were the very beginning of studying people's facial expressions. And like all good science, there's still looming debate about whether or not facial expressions are universal, or if we're just all, on the same culture as humans on Earth.
Okay.
In an article posted by Alexander Murphy on Vanderbilt.edu discussing facial expressions and emotion, she states, in a recent study by Du, Tao, and Martinez, they found that the 6 basic categories of emotion, we'll talk about those a little later, that are known to be differentiable through facial expression may not be enough to cover all of the visible emotion categories. The study included 230 human subjects in a facial action coding system analyzed the facial expressions of these participants through pictures. So this is one of the more recent studies. Basically, through the development, we've gotten into this very advanced way of figuring out which emotion someone has by just their face. So you'll look at their face, you'll see that they're frowning. Are they sad, or are they like sad and angry? And we'll get to that in a little bit too. Just to show you, like, there's 6 basic emotions, and there's a bunch of science to go along with it. So we've looked into the basics of whether or not facial expressions are universal. And I'm not going to cite numerous sources, but I've got like 3 or 4 that have really good material. I want to introduce where this facial expression can go, or what can be. It's hard to.
Well, it's like you want to show like where the concept of facial expressions corresponding to emotions, like where that concept can take us.
Yeah, there we go.
That's what I understand.
Thank you.
Yep.
So as I said before, I read a book called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, where he explained in one part of the book about Paul Ekman's facial expression studies. So a small excerpt from Malcolm Gladwell's New Yorker article called The Naked Face, it discusses a lot of the same stuff that he discusses within his book. I'm pretty sure he pulls a lot of the same information and just changes it up. So here it goes. In the 1960s, a young San Francisco psychologist named Paul Ekman began to study facial expression after learning about and meeting with a Princeton professor named Sylvan Tompkins, who may have been the best face reader there ever was. Tompkins, it was said, could walk into a post office, go over to the wanted posters, and just by looking at the mugshots, tell you what crimes the various fugitives had committed. Tompkins felt that emotion was the code to life, and that with enough attention to particulars, the code could be cracked. After meeting with Tompkins, Ekman decided to create a taxonomy of facial expressions. The entire process took 7 years. By working through each action unit combination, Ekman and his collaborator, Wallace Friesen, sorted through over 10,000 possible visible facial configurations. Yeah. And identified about 3,000 that seemed to mean something. So you did 10,000 different facial expressions, and
holy cow,
and you had a 30% success rate at finding something that meant something.
So like they'd look through and then they'd compare it to some other ones. Well, hang on. So how did they figure out which 3,000 meant something? Because wouldn't that mean that for each facial expression they'd have to compare it to all the others to see if there's any like noticeable differentiation?
There were different muscles in the face, and basically you can contort those muscles. They did a variety of one muscle contorted to 2 muscles contorted to a maximum of 3, I believe. And then they combined all of those into pictures, and then I guess they just subjectively picked like, hey, that looks like someone is sad, or that looks like someone is happy, or that looks like someone has to go poop and can't get off the plane.
Yeah, yeah. Is constipation one of those 6 basic emotions?
No. Unfortunately.
It should be. We found a 7th.
Oh,
man.
Well, there are 7, but the 7th is debated on. It's kind of like an unhappy anger, so it could be a secondary emotion.
So but obviously constipation's not debated. It's pretty securely in there.
Yeah, it's definitely in there.
No, but the reason I point that out is because this was 1960s. That'd have been before there was like any real like technological advantage that you could rely on. Because like doing that now, I think computers, you could write algorithms that would be able to differentiate, what do they call them? The emotions that mean something, or the facial expressions that mean something.
Yeah.
I think that would be a reasonable thing for a computer algorithm to do, but these people had to do it by hand.
And there's a lot of complexities to go into it, because a smile for one person may not look like the smile for the next. So it's difficult to tell you, like, or to tell a computer, like, hey, look at this person and tell me if they're smiling, and then it would be
Right.
like, well, I don't know. It looks like they're scared, but their teeth are showing, so
Right.
so they're smiling, you know? And
Well, actually, you go for it.
hey, no, you go ahead.
Well, what you could do is you could take the set that Ekman and Friesen created
Yeah.
and use it as a training set by which a artificial intelligence algorithm could learn
Yeah.
what different facial expressions would look like, and I think that would plausibly work. But yeah, you like you said, you'd still have to do the work
Yeah.
to begin with.
You're the computer genius, so I'm sure
Wow.
the computers can do it. But they did sort through them, and they made these configurations, and they cataloged every single one into just this catalog of facial expressions. I like to think of it as like a picture book with a bunch of like weird faces to flip through.
Yeah.
and each one apparently relates to one of the basic 6 emotions, which is even crazier.
Yeah.
All right. So what's left out of this article, and maybe I didn't get far enough, is that to check all these, they had to specifically target that muscle within their face. And if they couldn't target that muscle without like stimulation, they had to stimulate it with small electric shocks. They said it was like torture, and they had a terrible time if they had to do the electric shocks. So they tried super hard not to do that. But they went through with it, and it was the biggest study to date on facial expressions. And something very interesting happened to Ekman and Friesen, especially when they would do the angry or the sad expressions. It would affect their emotion for the rest of the day. So they would be angry if they were doing a bunch of like frowning and like squinting their eyes and acting angry.
Right.
This could likely relate to how our communication is 93% nonverbal. So we do, if you're communicating with someone, you're looking at their face most of the time.
Right.
You may look at their hand if they're pointing somewhere, but you're looking at their face to see, like, how do you actually feel? And emotions and facial expressions are the big points to this entire subject. It's what everyone's been studying to see, why is there this effect on Ekman and Friesen? Why were they sad? And why does it happen to so many people?
Okay.
So they weren't originally linked together. We just kind of thought, right,
the emotions and
the
the facial
emotions
expressions,
and the facial expressions within ourselves. Until a recent study by David Havas proved facial expressions share a link in our brain's ability to process emotions. In this study, researchers tested whether or not facial expressions affect one's emotional interpretation of written language. So 40 participants were given Botox treatments to inhibit the movement of the forehead muscles that cause brow furrowing involved in frowning, so sadness. The participants then had to read different happy or sad emotions. Those with the inability to furrow their brows took longer to process the sad or angry sentences after Botox treatment than before. However, the Botox did not affect their ability to process the happy sentences at the same speed. So the finding that facial expression can be linked to language comprehension was groundbreaking to the study of emotions.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. I mean, think about
Holy cow.
Think about it. Like, all you have to do is change what your forehead does, and it changes how you read a sentence conveying emotion.
Well, because that's like, I mean, that's obvious in my mind, because something that I read about podcasting actually is like, podcast in front of a mirror so you remind yourself to smile, because you sound better smiling.
Yeah.
Like, you sound happier smiling. And so I think it kind of relates to like how our facial expressions relate to like the emotions that we're trying to convey. And so, yeah.
So moving on from that, we're digging into some deeper articles that I've read. I didn't want to post a bunch of scientific mumbo jumbo, but really a lot of people believe that our facial expressions are a sign of our evolution. We've learned to communicate emotion through facial expressions, especially at an early age, to communicate that we need food, water, or milk, or a changed diaper, or, you know, a toy. Because our language processing isn't developed, we communicate in a more basic way, and we need those basic needs. So we've found a way to communicate as children with our faces, and that just moves and becomes more complex as we become adults.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so what you're telling me is the reason infants have the same reaction to like the same stimuli is because of how we've evolved evolutionarily, that, you know, way back at like our ancestors, they reacted this way to certain stimuli, and that's just kind of how we've evolved. Is that?
Yeah, and that's how it's moved. That's one of the prevailing theories.
I guess, you couldn't really know that, but
yep. And it's difficult to tell, you know, studying primates and whatnot. You know, we have some of the same facial expressions, like they smile and they blow kisses and stuff, but they don't have as complex of facial expressions as we do. So it's difficult to tell where that lines up within evolution, or if it does, or if it has just been a natural thing.
Okay. Sweet.
All right. So we're going to move into like possible real world possibilities of what this like facial expression technology and everything, like your Snapchat filters, what they can do with this. So one possibility is technology relating to facial expression or facial recognition. As I've said, if a software can detect possible emotions within the person, it could help solve psychological problems that they aren't willing to talk about. Like maybe they're going through a tough time, but they're smiling, so you can't really tell, but really that underneath that facade of a smile, there's like pain and stuff. You know, when people say there's pain in someone's eyes, even though they're out having fun and stuff like that. Like you can tell that secondary emotion, and as I said, we'll get into that in a little bit.
Right. Oh wait, so basically what you're telling me is those stupid animated animals that Apple's coming out with are basically as a result of these studies?
Probably. I don't know. What are these animated animals?
Have you not seen the commercials for those?
No.
Where like you like record your face or something talking, and like they'll animate this animal that you can send to the other person, and the animal will like talk to the other person. I think, at least. I don't have an iPhone, so I don't know.
I haven't heard of those, so
really,
it sounds scary though, because they'll have your face forever.
Thing. Yeah,
but
oh man,
but it could also help identify someone with ill intent in a crowded area. Now, I don't condone that, because it sounds like a computer would be like identifying who's guilty and who's not before a crime is committed.
Right.
But you know, it could be used for that. It has in fact been used for something similar by a policeman in Los Angeles, and I may get into that a little bit further later on.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. If you want to do that later.
Yeah. So with the development of the FACS, or the Facial Acting Coding System, that we discussed a little bit earlier, by Paul Ekman and Wallace Friesen, the categorization of any facial expression can be done. So this is the prevailing way to categorize your facial expression. This is done with the 6 or 7 categories outlined by the basic emotions of humans. So those are happiness, surprise, anger, sadness, fear, and disgust. Sometimes you can add contempt in there, but I really feel like contempt is anger, you know? It's not like definitions may be different, but
it's almost a mix between anger and disgust.
Yeah.
I think
so. That's why I would classify it as a secondary. You know, it's angry disgust or disgust and anger. You know.
Okay, so secondary you mean are like combinations between those six?
Basically, yeah.
Oh, so it's like secondary colors.
Yeah, any combination or permutation of those six. Hopefully you won't have all six of them in one, but you
that
might.
Would be odd.
You might have one of those weird ones.
Right.
Through numerous studies, these have become very recognizable by any culture. There are some confusions, but mostly a universal understanding exists between a smile and a frown. You know, a smile is meant to convey happiness, whether it's masking something is a little bit different, and you can usually tell when someone's masking something with a smile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, using the FACS, studies in the field of facial expressions have become easier to manage. Ekman has studied whether or not autonomic activities are affected by making certain facial expressions. So, autonomic would be like what your body does without you trying to affect it, or really like your temperature.
It's like subconsciously, right?
Yeah, it's your temperature of your body, among other things. Maybe the beating of your heart could be considered autonomic.
Right.
But
well, even some behavioral things people consider autonomic.
Yeah, little tics that you have. Like I sit at a table and I shake my leg, and I don't even realize it until someone's like, "Hey, you need to stop shaking your leg. You're shaking the whole table." And yeah.
Well, also, I'm reading a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini, and he talks about this click-whir mechanism of humans. So when somebody uses like a principle of influence on you, that when they do it really well, your body just kind of automatically responds like with a certain response that they want you to perform. So like, for example, if somebody is using like the principle of authority, so they've established themselves as like an authority, and then you're just going to like kind of subconsciously follow what they're going to say, like pretty much without fail. And so I think that's probably another good example.
Cool. Yeah, that is a good example. But to get back onto the facial expressions, when some people would change their facial expressions in Ekman's study, temperature in their extremities would change along with that facial expression. So consider like yourself getting angry. I think their temperature would go up, whereas sadness, maybe it would go down.
Right.
I didn't get into the specifics, so if I'm wrong on that, don't hold me to it.
It's fine.
But in reaction to, not only would your body temperature change due to your own facial expression, it would also change in relation to other people's expressions toward you. So if you saw someone that was angry, your body would change. And this was a really fascinating study for Ekman.
Okay.
And I really think a lot of the studies in this are fascinating. If you want to do more research on this, I've done it to the extent of telling you what happens. But if you really want to get into like some of the weird things that happen to your body, I definitely recommend checking it out. And we'll have some links for you at the show notes page at thebestwaytoexplainit.com/12.
12.
Yeah, we're moving on up. Yeah.
All right.
Hey, and another reason I think these studies of facial expressions are fascinating is that they have a huge appeal to like medical areas or other scientific areas. Think about if you can change your mood simply by smiling. It could have huge potential to either increase productivity or reduce depression in people who don't have like clinical depression, or maybe they do. This stuff could be groundbreaking in that area.
Right. Well, I think an interesting point about that is something that I've kind of forced myself to start doing is realizing how we as humans are motivated to do things. Like what's our number one driver of doing anything? Like you might think, okay, it's like success or fame or whatever, but it's actually homeostasis, right? So like our bodies, we want to remain the same way that we are, and like our brains do too. And so what you have to do in order to like change where you're at is you have to convince your body and your mind that you actually are the person that you want to become.
Yeah.
Because then your body's going to naturally do things that keep you in, homeostasis. And so, when as it goes to like facial expressions, if you want to be happy, like make your body act like it's happy.
Yeah.
And then, the rest of yourself will follow that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a kind of a practical application of this material.
Yeah, it sounds bad to say it like this, but it's kind of like a fake it until you make it mentality.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely can attest to some of the success. Basically, freshman year, I moved back to the town that I'm living in now, in high school. And freshman year, I was kind of like not social, not very like happy or anything. I was just kind of like bland and blah. And then I started to like fake my confidence a little bit, like just get a little bit more cocky. And then all of a sudden I could see like people start to attract to me. Like I would be able to talk to people and have fun. And I got invited out to a lot more like hangouts and stuff after I faked my well, I wasn't partying is the thing. Like I had good like clean friends in high school.
You had good morals.
I had good morals.
Well done.
But yeah, like once I started faking that, so maybe that has something to do with the facial expressions and everything that we've got going on. So I wanted to respond to a few more points that Luke was making. He talked about how emotions are subjective, or like a lot of things are subjective, but emotions are objective. And I think the way he meant it was we tend to have the same reaction to the same stimuli, just like the babies getting their toy or their candy taken away. But we really do have some subjective feelings toward things. So maybe a certain event happens and one person is happy about it and another person is sad about it. And that's just like the subjective view on what's going on, and maybe it's a win for someone and it's a loss for something else. So we're not always gonna like react happily to something that happens. But within like viewing someone's face, we can tell from that universal reaction what they're experiencing. On their subjective level. So the emotion's not subjective, it's the reaction, or the emotion's not objective, it's the reaction that's objective. Yes. Right, okay. Or at least universally accepted.
Right.
So I would use like the phrase different strokes for different folks. If you consider like scotch, some people love scotch, like it's the only thing that they're going to drink. And then other people abhor it. Or another great one would be gin.
Ooh, good word.
Yeah. Another great alcohol would be gin. Like I know a lot of people who hate gin, but I can drink like any kind of gin any day.
And if you want to learn which kinds, check out our alcohol episode, which I think, what was it, episode 10?
Episode 10.
Yeah, bestwaytoexplainit.com/10. All right, continue.
Yeah. I love it. I love the little plugs.
Yeah.
So taking everything within behavioral psychology with a grain of salt, which is what I do, I wanted to discuss some of the conflicting findings that go well at the point that we've meandered onto. Certain cultures have different cultural traditions. So Americans are like that loud, boisterous person when they're out. You'll see that when you see a movie and there's an American in a foreign country. And then Australians, like, they cuss all the time and they have beautiful accents. And then Chinese-speaking traditions include like 13 different levels of volume that communicate your social status and whether or not you respect someone. So the louder you speak, the more you respect them and stuff like that. So
are you sure about that?
I think so, right?
Is that the right way?
I don't know.
Before you go trying that out,
don't
just double check that.
Don't just go yelling at a Chinese person.
Yeah, because you might be doing it wrong.
But it's a way that they figure out what your social status is. So if you're speaking very loud, that typically means you're a higher social status. And I do know that much. Now, I'm not, like I said, don't go like shouting rudely at someone expecting them to think that you're treating them with respect. But to follow into this, some cultural traditions have affected how people portray their facial expressions. So the Japanese were proven in a study by Ekman to mask negative emotions with smiles more than Americans. So Americans, maybe you think of it as us being more blunt with our emotion. If we don't like something, we'll say it. Whereas the Japanese were like trying to cover up their unhappiness with a smile.
Right. We might tend to wear our emotions on our sleeves a little bit more. Yeah.
And not only are cultural differences among emotion and facial expression prevalent, but also differences between sex. So women tend to be specialists in the happiness department. Their smiles are way better than men's. Like if you've ever taken a picture with me, Scott, you can find them on the website. Like my smile for a picture is just the weirdest thing ever. I can't smile for it. And then,
I agree.
And then if I laugh or something, I have this very genuine smile. And it's so weird. But like women have this like great, even if it's a fake smile, like typically it's harder to tell. Whereas men tend to be specialists in the anger department because every man is always angry about something. Now that's my words, not research's.
But it's probably true.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So I could speculate and say that could also be an evolutionary step where like men were, they had to be angry because they were trying to protect the tribe or something like that.
Right.
So that kind of ends my research, but there is something to go along with how your facial expression and your emotions affect your day and stuff like that. So like I've heard this little story and I just heard it recently actually, and it's been sticking in my mind. So there were two dogs. There was a happy one and an angry one. And they both walked in front of a mirror. So when the happy dog caught its reflection, it saw another happy dog, and it walked happily away. But soon after that, an angry dog walks by the mirror and sees another angry dog. And this made the angry dog even more angry. So the moral of that story is basically your emotions can affect what you see in the world. And now that we've backed that up with a little behavioral psychology, we can understand the truth behind that little anecdote. I hope this answered your question, Luke. And remember, if there's something you've been meaning to research, hit us up at thebestwaytoexplainit.com/suggestions and leave a rating and review on iTunes or whatever podcast playing station you use. Snapshot that, send it to Scott at thebestwaytoexplainit.com, and we will enter you in a drawing for an Amazon Echo.
Oh yeah, it'll be really cool. Sweet, man. Dude, that was super interesting. Yeah. I honestly didn't think that would be as good. I didn't think that would go off as well as it would. I had such a little faith in you. It was crazy.
Well, understandable. I can be a bit of a letdown. But
tough but fair.
But this is one of those really interesting things where I was about to fall asleep at about 10 o'clock last night, and I was like, well, we've got to record and I don't even have anything written. Let me check the suggestions. I jumped on this one, and then I just jumped into a rabbit hole of different research.
I was gonna say.
And I had about 20 tabs open on my Google Chrome just to
That's so great when you're just like so deep into a research in a topic that you're just, and then you just get distracted on one tab, and then you're like, oh, I gotta click on that because I gotta get to that a little bit later, and it's a good feeling.
The clicking down the wheel on my mouse happened a lot last night.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so can you give me that policeman in LA situation about the facial recognition thing?
So I believe I may butcher his name. I think it's Tishman. I'm going to try and pull up the Naked Face article that this was in. Basically, a police officer in Los Angeles was out one night, and he pulls over and he sees a young kid, and the young kid looks like he's about to break into a store or something. So the policeman gets out of the car and he brings up his gun and he says, "Stop right there." And then the policeman looks at the kid's face, and the kid looks like he's gonna like go for a gun, and he was like drawing the gun up to point at the police officer, but the police officer could tell by the look on the face of the kid that he wasn't going to shoot him. He was too scared. And so the policeman puts his gun down, and the kid puts his gun down, and everything was okay as far as like no one died. So
Right.
then later on, the same police officer is sitting in a car, and they see what looks like a transvestite walking toward the vehicle, and the policeman sitting in the passenger side, I believe. They're sitting on the curb talking, and then this transvestite walks up and says hi, and then the policeman shoots him. Well, what you don't know about that is that the transvestite was carrying a flamethrower, and he was going to torch the car, but it was hidden somewhere on the person's dress. And the passenger, or the driver in the car, was like, "Why did you do that?" And then they find out later, and it was all based on this facial expression. So this police officer could tell what was going to happen if he didn't act on it. And I just think that's really interesting. Some of those people are out there, and they're like facial expression savants, and this isn't even a class of people that we really like consider to exist.
Right. Well, yeah. It's like, it's like the Criminal Minds people or something.
Yeah.
On steroids.
Yeah.
So do you think there would be potential for? I mean, regardless of the existence of cops, do you think there'd be potential to like stop, more of those illegitimate shootings? Like if there was a software that cops, okay, they're wearing the body cams, but the body cams are like so accurate that they were able to tell, okay, this guy is an imminent danger to you based on his facial structure, or okay, this guy might look a little bit shady, but based on his facial, expression, he's probably all right.
Yeah.
Like, do you think there'd be any potential for that? Like, that would reduce the amount of, people that shouldn't dying?
I'm not going to say no.
I just think that'd be kind of cool.
I think there could be a way to organize that, or
Right.
to develop that kind of software or whatever.
Yeah. Well, do you think that facial expressions are that good of a indicator?
Well, like I've said, you can get the gist of them, but then there's also maybe a look in someone's eyes that you can't you can't really tell a program to look at a guy's eyes and see that he's going to rob your store.
Maybe you can't.
Maybe I can't. The possibilities are endless, but I think there's a little bit of human intuition that goes in there, along with possibly something else that they're picking up. Now, there is a possibility that you could program a computer program. I just think it would be so complex to try and tell it like this guy is raising his hand versus this guy is grabbing a gun.
Yeah, we've done crazier stuff though.
We have.
Or this guy has a giant flamethrower on him.
Yeah.
Maybe that indicates. That's the real mystery.
Okay.
How does he have a giant flamethrower?
Well, I don't know if it's a giant flamethrower.
How is he going to torch a car if it's a hideable flamethrower?
Okay. It's not like it. All right, here it goes. I'm not going to try and repeat myself, but I'm repeating myself. One night he was working. This is Sergeant Bob Harms. I was way off on the Tishman thing. One night he was working in West Hollywood and spotted a man in drag. He rolled down the window to ask the guy a question just to get a reaction. The guy came over to the squad car and said, "I have something to show you." Later, after the incident was over, Harms and his partner learned that the man had been going around Hollywood making serious threats, that he was armed with a makeshift flamethrower, and what he had in mind, evidently, was to turn the inside of the squad car into an inferno. All Harms had was a hunch, a sense from the situation that the man's behavior, something that was the opposite of whatever John Yarbrough saw on the face of the boy he didn't shoot. Harms pulled out his gun and shot the man through the open window. His partner looked at him like, "What did you do?" Because he didn't perceive any danger. Harms said, "But I did."
Whoa.
So yeah, it's such an interesting thing, and that's the deal. Is like there's certain things where even though their car wasn't torched, the guy was intending on it. It's just
that's rough.
incredible.
I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, well, dude, that was really interesting.
Yeah. I hope we explained enough to get the point across to Luke and all our listeners out there.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. All right. Anything else you want to add?
I don't have anything, I don't think.
All right, guys. Make sure sign up for that contest. Send those screenshots to me, and we will see you on the other side.
Keep learning.